Oh my God, the dam's gone. That was the first scream. 2:37 a.m., followed by the unmistakable roar of floodwater tearing through vinyl fences and backyard koi ponds like they were made of paper. But let me back up, because this flood wasn't just a freak act of nature. This was the result of one HOM, one woman with a clipboard, and one very bad decision. Welcome to HOA Karen Files, where we dig into real-life stories of HOA madness, overreach, and destruction, both legal and literal. And today's story? Let's just say they tried to erase a dam, but they ended up drowning their entire neighborhood instead. You're going to want to watch this to the end. HOA demolished my dam without warning, so nature demolished their entire neighborhood. The sound hit before the meaning did. At first, I thought it was a thunderclap, a deep, hollow cracking noise that shook the window panes and made my coffee ripple like something out of Jurassic Park. Then came the vibration. It rumbled up through the floorboards of my cabin and into my bare feet like a warning tremor before the real quake hits. Something was wrong. Something was very wrong. I set my mug down, still steaming, and opened the front door. Dust. So much dust. It hung in the air like a curtain, catching the morning sun in streaks of gold and gray. And through it, I saw a silhouette. No, several, just barely visible against the haze. A backhoe's claw raised high like a metal vulture. The silhouette of three people in lawn chairs, watching. And the hole. The gaping, gut-wrenching hole where my dam used to be. I stepped out, still in my flannel pajama pants and a faded t-shirt that said, "Got water?" and stared. Gone. It was gone. 3 years of work, 3 years of hand-hauling stone, reinforcing retaining walls, calibrating spillways. All of it leveled in a single morning, flattened like an anthill under a boot. One of the women, Karen, of course it was Karen, was wearing a beauty pageant sash that read, "I kid you not, water belongs to the HOA." She sipped from a Starbucks cup like this was her Saturday entertainment, not the illegal demolition of a functional stormwater retention system. I didn't move. Not at first. My brain was still buffering. This wasn't just about a dam. It was about control and power and ignorance dressed up in vinyl siding and a sense of suburban entitlement. But I guess if I want to tell you the full story, how we got here, why that dam mattered, and what came next, I need to rewind the tape. Because like every great disaster, it didn't start with thunder. It started with silence. 3 years ago, I bought a plot of land at the top of Ridge Hollow. It was the kind of place you'd call rugged if you were being polite. Overgrown, pockmarked with erosion gullies, and completely neglected. But I saw potential. I saw what it could be. More importantly, I saw what lay beneath it. A watershed. A small but vital drainage path that every 5 to 7 years used to flood the entire development below. Oak Hills Estates, a planned community of cloned beige homes, tightly clipped lawns, and an HOA with a god complex, sat directly downhill. They were blissfully unaware that their peaceful little cul-de-sac existed at the mercy of gravity and clay-heavy soil. I wasn't. My late uncle, a retired Army Corps hydrological engineer, taught me to read terrain like a weathered map. Together, over beer and graph paper, we designed a runoff system for my property that would both preserve the hillside and protect the people below. The dam was the final piece, a reinforced earth barrier with a manual sluice gate and French drains to release overflow gradually. I filed the permits. All of them, with the county, with the state's water board, with the regional flood management district. I crossed every T and dotted every I because I knew one day someone would come sniffing around. But for the first 2 years, nobody did. The dam did its job in silence. The flood stopped. Yards stayed dry. No one even noticed. Until Karen moved in. She arrived like a weather front, sharp, cold, and full of thunder. Within weeks, she was elected HOA president, mostly because no one else wanted the job. But she took to it like a mall cop with a new whistle. Suddenly, residents were getting notices for non-regulation bird feeders and unsanctioned lawn gnomes. The kind of tyranny only an idle mind with a printer and a copy of the bylaws could invent. And then she noticed her yard wasn't flooding anymore. That's when everything changed. She showed up at my fence line in white jeans, wedge sandals, and an expression like she just licked battery acid. "I'm here about the structure," she said, waving vaguely at the ridge, though the dam wasn't even visible from where she stood. I explained politely that I wasn't part of Oak Hills Estates, that I didn't pay HOA dues, and that the structure she was referring to was fully permitted by 3 different government agencies. "Well, it's not in harmony with the visual aesthetic of our community," she replied. I blinked. "You can't see it." "That's not the point," she said. And right there I knew she'd made me a target. Over the next month, it escalated. Flyers showed up in mailboxes warning of the unauthorized reservoir on private land. HOA meetings suddenly included items like hydrological concerns and shadow structures. I was accused of building a pond to breed mosquitoes. Someone spray-painted "Damn Menace" on my mailbox. But I didn't flinch. I tightened the gate lock. I reinforced the spillway. And I documented everything. Because when people feel powerless, they lash out. And HOAs, they lash with paper, fines, notices, threats. But this was something else. This morning they didn't use paper. They used steel. And they have no idea what they've unleashed. You don't really know your enemy until they start smiling to your face. After the incident at the fence line, her term, not mine, Karen changed tactics. No more sour expressions and thinly veiled threats. No, now she brought cookies. Store-bought oatmeal raisin that tasted like passive aggression and artificial vanilla. She said she just wanted to have a constructive dialogue about hydrological aesthetics. I invited her in, politely declined the cookies. My kitchen table was covered in topographic maps and slope calculations. She looked at them the way most people look at tax forms. Suspicion, confusion, and a sense that something illegal was happening. "I just don't understand why you felt the need to build it," she said, perching awkwardly on the edge of a chair, not even bothering to hide the way she wiped it with a sanitizing wipe before sitting. "Because without it," I said, "your living room would have turned into a koi pond 3 times by now." She blinked. "I don't recall flooding being a problem. You moved here last year. The dam's been up for almost 3. Pause. "I just think water wants to move freely. What you've done," she gestured toward the ridgeline outside, "interrupts the natural order." I leaned forward, elbows on the table. "So does a house. So does a road. So does your vinyl fence with the solar-powered fairy lights." She didn't like that. Her mouth snapped shut like a mousetrap. A week later, I got my first notice of visual disruption. It accused me of maintaining a structure that disrupted the environmental continuity of Oak Hills Estates. I sent back a letter with a copy of my land deed, a highlighted note saying I wasn't part of Oak Hills Estates, and a post-it that read, "Visual continuity is not a legal term. Please consult a dictionary." They did not like that either. It escalated. By month's end, I'd received no less than 17 violations, not one from a government body, all from the HOA. They included unsanctioned water retention on unregulated terrain, unauthorized topographical modification, hydrological ambiguity, and my personal favorite, threat to HOA drainage identity. They fined me $300 for that last one. I framed it. Then came the letters. Karen sent certified notices addressed in cursive script that looked like it belonged on a wedding invitation. Inside were threats to report me to County Code Enforcement, the Department of Environmental Quality, FEMA. She CC'd all of them. I CC'd them back, with scans of every permit, every diagram, every stamped approval. I even included a nice little drone shot of the dam in action, just for flair. No one from the agencies responded, because there was nothing illegal happening, but that didn't stop the HOA. Soon after, the flyers started. They were printed in Comic Sans on neon yellow paper, slipped into every mailbox in Oak Hills Estates. Warning, unauthorized water retention system on private property. Shadow dam discovered. Built without community approval. No oversight. Could collapse at any time. Is your home in the flood path? Ask the board. They made it sound like I was constructing a nuclear reactor, not a modest earthen dam with drainage pipes and a safety spillway. People began looking at me differently, whispering when I walked into the hardware store. Parents called their kids back when I passed. Someone egged my truck. Once. That was a mistake. I installed trail cams the next morning. Then came the showdown. Karen called an emergency HOA meeting. Residents crammed into the community rec hall, folding chairs squeaking, styrofoam coffee cups in hand. I hadn't been invited. Naturally, I showed up. She was already speaking when I walked in. A dangerous precedent, she was saying, pacing in front of a trifold presentation board like a low-rent TED Talk. Private infrastructure with public consequences. This is not how communities thrive. She saw me, paused, then smiled. I'm so glad Mr. Allen could join us, she purred. Perhaps he'd like to explain why he felt it was acceptable to alter the local watershed without consulting the board. I stood in the aisle. No mic needed. I didn't consult the board, I said, because the board has no authority over my land. Murmurs. Karen clasped her hands the way school principals do, right before suspending someone. But your actions affect us, she said sweetly. Water doesn't respect fences. And neither do bulldozers, I replied. The room froze. Her eyes narrowed. I beg your pardon. I stepped forward. Let's be real clear. This isn't about water. It's about control. You didn't know the dam existed until your hydrangeas stopped drowning? And instead of asking why, you assumed the worst. You made it a threat. It is a threat, she snapped. There is standing water above our community. That's not safe. Neither are your 1980s French drains, I said. But I don't go tearing up your culverts in the middle of the night. Gasps. One guy in the back choked on his coffee. Karen's jaw twitched. This meeting, she said icily, is for HOA members only. A voice spoke from the side. Vince, quiet guy, mortgage broker, lived on lot 9. He's not wrong, though. Karen blinked. Excuse me? Vince stood. We haven't had a real flood since he built the thing. I remember the year before. My whole garage got soaked. Last 2 years, dry. A few nods. Someone muttered, yeah, same here. Karen held up her hand. This is about unauthorized action. If we let him get away with this, what's next? Someone building a moat? A watchtower? Laughter. I tilted my head. Would the moat need permits? More laughter. Karen turned beet red. She slammed her folder shut. Meeting adjourned, she snapped, storming out. I thought that might be the end of it. That maybe, just maybe, logic had won the day. It hadn't. It had merely pissed her off. The next morning, the gate lock was cut. Camera 1 gone. Camera 2 smashed. Camera 3 dangling by wires. I knew the footage backups were safe, tucked in a metal box inside the sluice mechanism. I checked, intact. But that didn't stop the cold rage crawling up my spine. They'd crossed the line, and I had the proof. I spent the afternoon uploading the clips to cloud storage. Then I called my lawyer. Her name was Sarah, and she had the temperament of a judge and the voice of a tired librarian. She reviewed the footage in silence, then sighed. Oh, Karen, she said softly, shaking her head. You've made it personal. Because here's the truth about HOAs. They thrive on compliance, not confrontation. They expect you to roll over, to pay the fine, trim the hedge, repaint the fence. They do not expect you to fight back with a hard drive full of timestamps and hydrology permits. But I was done playing nice. Next stop, county offices. Because if they wanted a war, I was going to bring it. With facts, with evidence, and with the full force of every agency they thought I hadn't called yet. It started with a wedding invitation. My cousin Mel was getting married in Montana. Rustic barn, whiskey barrels, fairy lights. The whole Pinterest fantasy. I almost didn't go. Something felt off. You ever get that itch on the back of your neck? Like the air's too still, like something's watching? I ignored it. I shouldn't have. I left on a Friday morning. Before pulling out, I walked the dam one more time, checked the gravel along the retaining wall, cleared the spillway intake. tightened the sluice gate, posted a laminated sign at the trailhead that read, "Private property, structure monitored by cameras, no trespassing." Then I locked the gate with a chain I'd welded shut. It would take bolt cutters to get through. Spoiler, that's exactly what they used. When I got back Sunday night, everything was wrong. You know that feeling when you walk into your house and immediately know someone's been inside? It was like that, except it wasn't my home that had been violated. It was the land. I didn't even make it all the way to the ridge before my boots began to sink. Not deep, but just enough to notice the soft churn of recently disturbed earth. I crested the hill, and then I saw it, or rather didn't. No dam, no stonework, no sluice gate. No fencing, just a ragged scar in the ground where 3 years of blood, sweat, and civil engineering had once stood. It was like looking at the remains of a dream, smashed and soaked, bits of rebar poking out of the mud like ribs in a grave. A broken piece of the sluice handle stuck out of the ground like a tombstone. Tire tracks led back down toward Oak Hills Estates. Not regular tires, wide tires, construction vehicle wide. I followed them a few paces until something bright caught my eye. A laminated sign. Of course it was laminated. Stapled to a cheap wood stake, flapping in the wind like a low-budget grave marker. It read, "Removal of unauthorized structure, pursuant to HOA Section 8.3 Oak Hills Estates, Board approved, action no date, no signature." Just that cursed HOA letterhead. It felt unreal. Like a nightmare written in legalese. I didn't yell, didn't scream, didn't throw anything. I just turned and walked, straight to the first trail cam. Gone. Tree trunk scraped where the mount had been ripped out. Second cam? Lens shattered, wires hanging. Third, crushed under a rock. But the memory card was still intact. But I wasn't worried, because I had redundancy. Inside the dam's control box, which by some miracle hadn't been completely obliterated, was a weather-sealed flash recorder, my backup for the backup. I unscrewed the panel with numb fingers, pulled out the drive, and went home. I uploaded the footage, and what I saw made my blood run cold. The camera feed flickered to life. It was time-stamped 11:14 a.m. Saturday. 2 men in orange vests walk into frame. No company logos, just generic safety vests and bolt cutters. They cut the lock. 10 seconds later, a rented skid steer rumbles into view. And behind it, standing tall, smug, and oblivious to the camera angle, was Karen. I paused the footage. There she was, sunglasses perched on her head, HOA badge hanging around her neck like she was deputized by God. Starbucks cup in hand, barking orders. "Clear it all," she said. "This place is an eyesore." The operator hesitated. If he wanted a damn pond, he should have asked us first. I showed the footage to Sarah, my attorney, the next morning. She nearly dropped her coffee. "This," she said slowly, "is not just trespassing." I raised an eyebrow. "This is destruction of permitted infrastructure during an active flood season. We're talking environmental code violations, property damage, and maybe even criminal liability if we play it right." I leaned back, heart still hammering. "You think it's enough?" She smirked. "Oh, I think they just demolished their own defense." We didn't go to the police. Not yet. We went higher. First, we filed a report with the county's Water Management Division. I handed them a drive full of footage, copies of all the original permits, and a fresh survey showing the destroyed earthworks. Then we contacted floodplain oversight. The county was already tracking precipitation buildup from a stalled cold front sitting over the valley. We knew the forecast. We knew what was coming. They didn't. 3 days later, the drizzle began. By day 2, my gravel path had turned to slush. By day 4, I could feel the earth groaning. Water pulled in low spots the dam would have absorbed. Without the retention basin, every drop funneled down the ridge like a loaded gun pointed straight at Oak Hills Estates. I tried to warn them. Emailed the HOA. No reply. Left a certified letter. No response. Even Vince. Lot 9. Vince said they'd gone radio silent since the footage leaked to a few concerned residents. No apology. No explanation. just silence, the kind that comes right before a scream. On the sixth night at exactly 2:37 a.m., I woke to a sound I'll never forget. A crack. Deep, wet, final. I threw on boots, grabbed a flashlight, and ran. The overlook was soaked, mud sliding underfoot, and through the beam of my light I saw it. Water, not pooling, charging. A brown, roaring torrent barreling down the hill like a stampede of angry bulls. It slammed into the retaining wall behind Karen's cul-de-sac with a sound like thunder cracking a rib cage. The wall buckled, split, fell. Water surged through her backyard, turned the koi pond into a mud pit, and lifted patio chairs like bathtub toys. Down below, the street disappeared. Trash bins floated like parade floats in a river of mulch, silt, and shattered landscaping. And at the front of it all, half buried in the sludge, floated one of Karen's neon flyers. Unauthorized structure. The irony could have drowned us all. I filmed everything. The breach, the mudslide, the cars half submerged, the neighbors screaming into the wind, and I made sure to film the for sale sign floating down the road like a ghost ship. By sunrise, emergency services had arrived. Firefighters in rafts, police rerouting traffic, neighbors in bathrobes crying into each other's arms. Karen stood in the middle of her ruined lawn, pink bathrobe soaked, mascara streaked, holding her phone like it might turn back time. Our eyes met across the water. She looked like someone who had just realized she'd picked the wrong enemy. I waved. She didn't wave back. The storm lasted 7 days, not drizzle, not polite, romantic rain tapping on windows. This was wrath. The kind of rain that makes old dogs hide under porches and grown men pray for backup generators. A collision of systems, Gulf moisture meeting a stalled Arctic front, turned our valley into a pressure cooker of water and wind, and the dam was no longer there to take the hit. By the second day, the ground had given up. Soil that had once absorbed gallons now turned sponge-like, bloated and heavy. Water ran in rivulets down the ridge, carving new paths, filling voids, pooling in trenches that weren't supposed to exist. Every morning, I walked the ridgeline with a clipboard. I took readings, logged flow rates, snapped photos. Not because I could stop it. I couldn't. But because I knew what was coming, and someone had to bear witness. Down below, Oak Hills Estates was still pretending it could out-organize gravity. Sandbags lined driveways like dominoes. Sump pumps groaned under porches. Karen sent out an emergency bulletin titled, "How to Stay Safe and Dry During Challenging Times." It included helpful tips like use towels and contact your board liaison. I wanted to laugh. Instead, I kept filming. On day 5, the first basement failed. Lot 17, a nice couple with 2 kids. Water came through the floor vents like a reversed waterfall. They evacuated in the middle of the night. By morning, 3 more homes had flooded. And then came the mold. You can smell it before you see it. That sickly sweet rot that clings to everything. Walls, insulation, skin. People started asking questions. Why now? Why so bad? Why did the flood stop for 2 years and then suddenly come back? Quiet Vince from Lot 9, knocked on my door with a USB drive. "They're blaming you," he said. The file was a PDF, a formal complaint sent to the county by the HOA. Subject line, unauthorized removal of stormwater retention system by private individual. The document accused me of dismantling the dam, my own dam, without notification or coordination, resulting in catastrophic downstream flooding and structural harm to community assets. I read it 3 times. Then I laughed so hard I had to sit down. "They destroyed it," I muttered, "on camera, with bolt cutters and a bobcat. And now they're saying I took it down?" Vince winced. "They're panicking. Insurance is asking questions. People are pissed." Good. That afternoon, someone new showed up at my door. Yellow boots, clipboard, no HOA badge. County emergency manager. "Mr. Allen," she asked, pushing her wet hair from her face. "You the property owner of parcel 83B? I nodded. She stepped inside and looked at the wall where I'd posted every permit, blueprint, and inspection report like some conspiracy theorist of hydrology. "I've been briefed on the situation," she said. I'd like to see everything. So I showed her. The videos, the maps. The footage of Karen sipping coffee while illegal demolition occurred. The before and after drone shots. The rainfall data. The hydrograph overlays. The lawsuit papers. She didn't say much, just took notes. Lots of them. Finally, she snapped her notebook shut. This runoff event, she said, has triggered a provisional reclassification of the entire floodplain zone. What does that mean? It means Oak Hills is now considered high risk. Insurance premiums will spike. Infrastructure retrofits will be mandated. Environmental remediation will be required. It's going to cost a lot of people a lot of money. I tilted my head. And liability? She nodded. That's next. Within 48 hours, the story flipped. Karen sent out a message on Nextdoor, claiming I was a reckless amateur hydrologist who removed the dam for personal reasons. I posted the video, just a 25-second clip, her voice crystal clear. Clear it all. This place is an eyesore. It went semi-viral, shared across the HOA Facebook page, posted in group chats. One neighbor set it to classical music and re-uploaded it as HOA Symphony and Stupid, Opus 1. They tried to claim the video was doctored. I dropped the full time-stamped trail cam footage. Silence, then panic. Emergency HOA meetings turned into shouting matches. Residents demanded to know who authorized the demolition. Karen pointed fingers. At Richard, at board procedures, at confusing language in the bylaws. No one was buying it. 6 houses were uninhabitable. 2 families were relocated to motels. Mold remediation trucks lined the streets like an invasion. Insurance adjusters circled the neighborhood like buzzards. And every homeowner knew this didn't have to happen. 9 days after the flood, I got a letter. Gold embossed, certified. The HOA was suing me. The claims were absurd. Gross negligence. Unauthorized landform modification. Intentional disruption of stormwater equilibrium. They were accusing me of taking down the dam that they had illegally demolished. I handed the letter to Sarah. She read it, chuckled. This, she said, is the dumbest move they could have made. We filed a countersuit within 72 hours. Trespassing, destruction of permitted infrastructure, violation of floodplain regulations, malicious property damage. We subpoenaed the landscaping crew, Craigslist hires with no credentials, and every single board member who had signed off on the removal. We attached the video evidence, the permits, the rainfall data, the damage assessments, and then we waited. But we didn't have to wait long, because the county made their own announcement. In a 14-page report released to the public, they concluded, the removal of the privately permitted stormwater retention structure significantly increased the severity of flooding experienced in the Oak Hills Estates residential zone. In plainer terms, the dam worked, and removing it caused the flood. That one paragraph set off a firestorm. Residents revolted. A petition to remove the entire HOA board gathered 83 signatures in one day. Vince organized a town hall in the high school gym. Karen showed up with a binder. She left to a chorus of booing. We dressed like we were going to a funeral. Black suit, gray tie, no emotion. Not because we were grieving, but because they were. They just didn't know it yet. The courtroom was modest, county level, fluorescent lights, linoleum floor, wooden benches with gum stuck under them. But what it lacked in drama, it made up for in consequences. And the judge? The Honorable Judith Marlin, no-nonsense, former environmental prosecutor, known for one thing. If you come into my courtroom with weak logic, bring snacks. You'll be here a while. Perfect. Their side went first. The HOA's attorney, a sharp-suited man with a nervous tic, opened with what he probably thought was righteous thunder. Your Honor, this is a case of reckless disregard. A landowner took it upon himself to construct and later dismantle an unregulated stormwater retention structure, which endangered the lives and properties of every family in Oak Hills Estates. He pointed to a satellite image of the ridge, taken 2 days after they bulldozed the dam. No dam visible assures his proof. Sarah leaned toward me and whispered, he just played himself. When our turn came, Sarah stood like she had all the time in the world. Ladies and gentlemen, What you've just heard is a story. A dramatic one, but not a true one. She clicked the remote. Drone footage filled the screen. The dam, fully intact, just days before the demolition. Then came the footage from the trail cams. The bobcat arriving. The bolt cutters. Karen's voice. Clear it all. This place is an eyesore. Gasps echoed in the courtroom. Sarah let the silence hang, then passed around copies of my permits. Each page stamped, dated, signed. Then she called our star witness, the contractor. He took the stand wearing a wrinkled polo and nervous eyes. Sarah, did you receive written authorization from the landowner to perform demolition? Contractor, no, ma'am. Sarah, were you informed the structure was permitted? Contractor, I wasn't told anything. I just thought it was a rock wall or something. Sarah, who hired you? Contractor, the lady with the badge. He nodded toward Karen. Sarah, did you ask whether it was legal? Contractor, yeah, I said it seemed risky. She told me, he looked down. Sarah, please repeat it for the court. He sighed. She said, the whole neighborhood's on our side. He's just some loner with a hill and a grudge. The courtroom fell completely silent. Karen turned pale. One of the board members audibly muttered, "Oh my God." Sarah turned back to the judge. No further questions. The final blow came when we introduced a document from the HOA's own meeting minutes, leaked by an anonymous resident. It included a single line, "Take care of the dam while he's gone." No one could argue intent after that. When the judge returned with her ruling 2 weeks later, her voice was calm, almost bored, as she delivered the verbal equivalent of a tactical nuke. The court finds the HOA's claim to be without merit, lacking evidence, and motivated by a pattern of malicious interference. The plaintiff's suit is dismissed in full. Regarding the counterclaim, this court finds the defendants liable on 4 counts: unauthorized demolition of a permitted structure, willful property damage, violation of environmental code, and negligent contribution to municipal flooding. The room was dead quiet until she added, damages are awarded to Mr. Allen in the amount of $1,970,000 for structural loss, $620,000 for environmental remediation, $130,000 for legal expenses, and $500,000 in punitive damages. Total, $3. $12 million. I didn't smile. I just looked at Karen, now slumped, eyes hollow, and gave her a small, respectful nod. No gloating, just recognition that she had tried to control nature and lost. A week later, the HOA imploded. Karen was removed as president. 3 board members resigned. The HOA's insurance refused to cover the payout, citing malicious, unauthorized actions. And me, I had my check. But that wasn't the win. The win came when Vince and the neighbors showed up. Not with pitchforks, but with shovels, to rebuild the dam, together. It didn't end with a bang. No gavel slam, no applause, no dramatic gasp in a courtroom, just a letter. A 1-page notice from the county registrar's office. The Oak Hills Estates Homeowners Association is hereby declared administratively dissolved due to fiscal insolvency and procedural negligence. In plain English, the HOA was dead. But justice doesn't just stop when the charter folds. The fines didn't disappear with the laminated notices. The court had ruled the board members personally liable for the damages not covered by their now-defunct insurance. That meant Karen, and Richard, and 2 others who signed off on the demolition. Their names were on the documents. Their hands were on the wrecking bar. Karen appealed twice, lost both. By the time it was over, she had mortgaged her home, sold her BMW, and drained her savings to cover her share of the $3.1 million judgment. It wasn't enough. A month after the final ruling, a bright orange "Motivated Seller As Is" sign appeared on her lawn. Not the classy kind, the desperate kind. The kind that screams, "Please just take it." Rumor has it, she took a job in some planned community outside Tulsa. She now moderates a Facebook group called HOA Free Living, Reclaim Your Lawn, and posts daily complaints about squirrels and non-compliant trash bins. Some say she learned her lesson. Others say the squirrels are winning. As for me, I didn't cash the check right away. I stood on that ridge for 3 mornings in a row, coffee in hand, staring at the scar where the dam once stood. And then I got to work. But this time, I wasn't alone. It started with Vince. He showed up one Saturday morning with work gloves and a 5-gallon bucket of gravel. Didn't say anything. Just nodded and started reinforcing the first layer of stone. Then came Martha from Lot 12. She'd lost her herb garden to the flood, brought sandwiches and a level. Then the Martinez twins, teenagers who used to throw rocks at my mailbox, carried rebar up the slope like it was a cross to bear. No one talked about the lawsuit, not out loud. But every hammer strike, every sandbag laid, every wheelbarrow filled was an apology written in labor, and I accepted. We rebuilt the dam in 5 weeks, faster, stronger, more elegant than before. Triple reinforced earth wall, retaining stone with interlocking baffles, new gated spillway with an automated sensor system powered by a small solar array. We even planted willow trees around the basin to help absorb runoff and reinforce the soil. It wasn't just engineering, it was art, it was healing. On the final day of construction, the sun came out for the first time in 2 weeks. The clouds broke open like a blessing. The entire valley glowed. The creek trickled through the new channel, soft and rhythmic, like the land itself was exhaling. We stood there in silence, not a crowd, not a ceremony, just neighbors, finally neighbors. A few days later, I installed the plaque. Simple aluminum, weatherproofed, screwed into a solid oak post at the edge of the spillway. Bold letters etched in black. Next time, ask the guy who understands gravity. Underneath, in smaller font, County Permit, Nugger 4821B drainage capacity, 172,000 gal restored, together. Now, when it rains, no one panics. They walk their dogs, they wave. They nod at the dam like it's part of the landscape. Permanent, trusted, quiet. Even the holdouts, the ones who never said sorry, now walk their routes a little slower, like they understand something they didn't before. Not just about runoff, about responsibility. Sometimes people ask me if I'm proud of what happened, if I feel like I won. The truth? I didn't build that dam to prove anything. I built it because I understand water. It doesn't care about bylaws or titles or laminated threats. It just follows the path of least resistance. It does what it's meant to do, and so do I. The final irony? The county reclassified my land as an environmental buffer zone, legally untouchable. No HOA jurisdiction, no zoning board reviews, no hydrangea violations. Just soil, stone, sky, and peace. There's a quiet kind of justice in that, the kind that doesn't need headlines, the kind that doesn't shout, the kind that stands year after year through storm and sun and whispers, "You tried to control the water. You forgot who built the dam."